Hey, church, thank you for streaming in with us this morning. We're glad to have you. This weekend, actually, we're supposed to be at May Camp. And it's really sad to think about because I love being at May Camp. I like being in the environment where we can just catch up with everyone and get to know each other more. And since we can't do that, I'll catch you up on my own life. So since I last spoke, a few things have happened. I graduated, that's a big one. I finished a huge, like 2,000 piece puzzle. That was super accomplishing for me. And I turned a year older. But the biggest change probably is that I started to work out more. Right after COVID happened, it boomed, and we started isolating. I actually stopped physical activities for a good month and a half. No volleyball, no gym, no nothing. And actually one day, well, 2 weeks ago, I was video calling with some friends in Hamilton, and we're kind of complaining about the whole isolation thing and how we're like so unfit and we're gaining weight and all this stuff. And what we decided to do was right then and there, we hit the ground and we started to work out together. And then we decided to do the same thing the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day. And then now we've been exercising every day since then. And honestly, feel free to join us. Let me know. We're like open group. We meet up at like 5 p.m. Mountain Time every day pretty much. And I think it's awesome. Right? Exercise is good. At least I can say it's good now that I'm sitting here not exercising. But honestly, in the middle of the workout, it's the worst, right? I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. As I'm sweating profusely and struggling to do one measly push-up, some of the deepest thoughts actually pop into my head. And it kind of sounds something like this. What in the world happened for me to end up here, like breathless, tired, aching, dying, right? And I thought to myself, I wouldn't be here working out and video calling if I didn't call my Hamilton friends that one day. And I wouldn't actually call them if I didn't ever move to Calgary, right? And then I wouldn't move to Calgary if I didn't marry Christine. I wouldn't have married Christine if our families didn't know each other when we were younger. Our families wouldn't have known each other if they weren't pastors. My dad wouldn't have been a pastor if he didn't escape from Vietnam. He wouldn't have to escape from Vietnam if the communist regime never took over, and communism would like never really be anything if it wasn't for Karl Marx. So why am I struggling working out, video calling my friends, living in Calgary and married to Christine? It's because of Karl Marx, because of communism. And I thought that's kind of funny to think about. But jokes aside, I actually love being in Calgary. I love being married to Christine, working at LCC, getting to know good people. I believe I'm right where God wants me to be. But from my whole chain reaction example earlier, millions of little and big things had to come together perfectly for me to be here right now chatting to you guys. Is it all a coincidence, or is there more? Today we're starting a new series in the book of Esther, and this book is unlike any other book in the Bible because there is no mention of God. There's no mention of worship or prayer. So maybe a question will pop up in your head, and it's kind of like, what is this even doing in the Bible? Well, it's written without the mention of God because the author is forcing us to ask, where is God working in the exile? Where is God working when we don't see him? Are the events in the book strictly coincidental, or is that God? I believe this is a question worth asking in our own time. We tend to think that God is only working when there's something crazy that happens, something extraordinary occurs, like miracles and healings, prophecies, answered prayers, or the Sunday night of winter camp. But if we grasp onto understanding of reality, we understand that God is not only working in the extraordinary things, but in all things, especially the simple, the common, and the ordinary. If you kind of been tracking with us through the past few years and take a note of our past series other than Timothy, you will have noticed that we've been going through Israel's story and history chronologically. Israel before it was a great nation, Then Israel prospers and great under King David. And then now Israel invaded, ransacked, exiled, living under the rule of surrounding nations. Esther's story takes place during this period, the exile. And as we look into the theme of God working in our everyday, ordinary things of life, this has huge implications for us in our faith life. That the extraordinary happens when we are faithful in the ordinary. And this is such good news for us because, like, many of us have been stuck at home for so long and separated from our normal friends, our normal routine, and life has been so blah. Like, it's been on pause and absolutely nothing exciting or extraordinary has been going on. Just a lot of time to kill, really. However, we can achieve great things even in isolation as we faithfully work together with God in the ordinary. The main character we're focusing on is this guy named Mordecai. He's the main role model we should learn from because he showed faithfulness in ordinary things. So our question today is, how do extraordinary things start? We learn from Mordecai that it starts in the ordinary. Mordecai shows us how to be faithful in the ordinary in two ways. So the first way, love for our close neighbors. And the second way, attention to detail. But before we actually go on our Bible passage, I want to give more context. I know it's a lot, but bear with me. It's so that the story actually makes sense. In the first chapter of Esther, King Xerxes of Persia, I imagine it's that guy from 300 with all those piercings. He had a celebration he kind of threw for himself. I know it sounds super pathetic, but when you're a king, you get to do this kind of stuff. And the whole point of the celebration was to show the people of Persia all of the things that he possessed. And get this. Doing this took 180 days. The show-off party took half a year. Imagine how balling and rich this guy was. I mean, I could probably show you all of my possessions in a minute or two, right? And then to add on to that, after this huge party, this half-year party, there's a 7-day after party of just straight drinking. So as the king and his fellow men were getting drunk, Xerxes thought it was a great idea to invite his queen to the party so that he can show her off as well to all the other drunk dudes. And yeah, once again, kind of pathetic, but when you're king, I guess you get to do this kind of stuff. The queen, however, said no, which I'm sure most sensible women would, but because she said no and rejected the king's order, she was removed from the position of queen. So now the king needed a new queen. So he did what any of us would do when we're looking for a good, awesome, potential life partner. He looked for the hottest babe. And that's a terrible search plan, by the way. But Xerxes, he started a grand search for the next queen in the form of a beauty pageant. Persia Idol. The next Miss Persia. And that's where we see Esther come in, right? And with Esther comes Mordecai, her guardian. And Mordecai is faithfully worshiping God in the ordinary through his advice and actions that God uses in extraordinary ways later on in the story. Mordecai has been put in the Bible to teach us what faith looks like in a time like ours. Let's go to our passage. So it comes after that whole story. It's from Esther 2, 5-11. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, like the order to start the beauty pageant search, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day, he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. We get our 2 points from this passage focusing on Mordecai. The first point is that extraordinary things start with love for our neighbors, for our close neighbors. In our introduction to Mordecai, we see that he was a kind man, right? As his younger cousin, Esther lost her parents and became an orphan in this foreign country, and her future was pretty much gone. Mordecai had taken her in and raised her as his own daughter, though he had nothing to gain from it. He took care of her in every way. So financially, physically, socially, emotionally, spiritually. And from our reading, we understand that Mordecai and his family belonged to the tribe of Benjamin. So he was a God-fearing Jew. And as the story goes on, it shows much more evidence of his strong faith in God. But even just now, from what we know from the beginning, we should be impressed that he applied his strength, kindness, and faith to one of his closest neighbors, Esther. We know that Mordecai's care for her not only made her beautiful and charming, but also made her a woman of character, because once again, later on, we get to see her faith lived out in very bold ways. But health, charm, character, and the fear of God do not just appear out of nowhere. No, it's a result from Mordecai caring for, loving, and pouring into her. There's a sense of deliberation and intentionality here when it comes to Mordecai's love and care towards Esther. And the thing with intentionality is that it is focused and it is selective. So we have much to learn from this. We see this even in Jesus' ministry, right? It's cool to see how Jesus grew his ministry all the way from just himself to like a whole church, billions of people. And here's what I mean. Jesus loved everyone, right? So did he focus his energy on everyone equally? Well, no, he didn't. That's impossible, even for Jesus at the time. He intentionally focused on just his close neighbors, the 12 disciples. And this took deliberation and focused effort. What this means, unfortunately, is that we can't put 100% attention, time, effort equally into all of our relationships. And I know it sounds unfair, but that's just the reality of our limitations. Before, I've mentioned and talked about my dear friend Kevin from Vancouver. He's like a brother to me. And one summer, years ago, we were blessed to actually become friends with a lot of different people. And as awesome as that sounds, and it created a problem because with so many different friend groups, a lot of events and hangouts would eventually crash. So a birthday party with one group of friends happening at the same time as a dinner with another group of friends. Maybe a Bible study in one place and a jam session at another. And we come across scenarios where sometimes there were 3 or 4 events happening at the same time. So what could we do? Us being geniuses and like innovators, we came up with a system, right? So a system to be at all events and not miss anything. What we did was we'd go to one event first for maybe 15 or 20 minutes and we'd like make a boom, right? We make it lively. We take pictures, we talked, and then we dipped out, we left. On to the next event, same thing, there for 15, 20 minutes, had a lot of fun, created a lot of memories, talk to as many people as we can, and then dipped out, and then same thing again and again and again for the whole summer. And I gotta admit, it was super fun, but in hindsight, it wasn't super effective, right? It actually may have caused more damage than good for a few reasons, because, well, Kevin and I were like always so exhausted and tired that summer. Some people we met for the first time, they would think we're like scumbags and like shady because we only came for a little bit, made a scene, then left. But the biggest issue was probably the fact that we had a lot of friends, and yet most of those friendships were just shallow. It didn't do us any good, didn't do them any good, no life-changing effect. Just some good memories to reminisce on, and that's about it. And those aren't great relationships. No, the great ones are the close, intimate relationships of deep friendship and love. That's where world-changing things happen. That's even where the best evangelism happens. So my mindset changed a little bit since then. Still be kind and loving to everyone, but focus your efforts into carefully choosing relationships. And when you choose those relationships, love them in a way that covers their physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs. Jesus chose 12 disciples. Mordecai chose Esther. I chose Christine and a few others. Who do you choose? Who will be your close relationships? Whoever they are, take those relationships seriously. Be intentional with them. Don't just spend all your time gaming or playing sports with them. And definitely don't lose your relationships for stupid reasons, as, well, you probably know a lot of people do. One thing I've been doing these past couple of weeks that actually has been super helpful for me was setting up appointments, and that, like, intentionally setting it up with people I want to talk to, I want to get in touch with. And because it's so easy to say, hey, let's catch up sometime, and then never do anything about it. Never catch up. Why not just take the extra step to say, hey, let's catch up sometime. What days are you free? Okay, let's do Wednesday at 1. I'll put it in my schedule. Like an extra 20 words that actually gets something done. It becomes official. Be deliberate and schedule something in. Maybe it's been helpful for me, and it's intentional, right? That's the first thing we learn from Mordecai. That intentional, deep commitment to love our neighbors makes a huge difference to God's work. Our second point is that extraordinary things start with being attentive to detail. For this one, we're zoning in on verse 10 and 11. So verse 10, Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day, he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Now, just one small detail, he actually worked at the gate of the palace, so he wasn't like going from all the way like miles away to come. But still, every day he came to visit her. So let's run through this scenario. So one day, Mordecai's worst nightmare happened. The king of Persia was on the look for beautiful women, and Esther was chosen and taken away from Mordecai to live in the king's harem as a concubine for the rest of her life. That was it. That was her fate. That was all she was ever going to be. Now, what did Mordecai do? Well, I think it's easiest to kind of just like brush your hands and kind of say, well, I did my best and now I can't do anything because she belongs to the king. But no, Mordecai couldn't do that because love demanded that he stayed with Esther in the situation by paying attention to the details. Paying attention to the details takes time, effort, and intentionality. Now, what does attention to detail really mean? It means being engaged with your mind, right? And this manifests itself in different forms. Mordecai shows us a few ways that paying attention to the details and being engaged with your mind looks like. We read that Mordecai, every day, he walked back and forth around the area where Esther and all the other beautiful women were staying. And it's like, what's going on? Was he a loser with nothing to do? Was he like a pervert trying to get like a peek at the chicks? No, he was paying attention to the details. He was staying in touch with Esther to see how she was doing. And while he was doing that, he was seeing what was going on in the palace. He did this out of a spirit of love and faith, which means he is also attentive to the details of the Bible, of God. Being attentive to the details means engaging your mind. Mordecai engages his mind in his love for Esther, in staying current with what was happening, and in knowing his Bible. And with all these things working together, Mordecai had the wisdom to advise Esther to keep her Jewish identity a secret. And this seems a bit counterintuitive because many faithful characters before Esther would actually honor God by making it super clear that they were God-fearing Jews. But from Mordecai's attention to detail, seen in his love for Esther, his knowledge of the political environment, and his awareness of God's workings, he actually worshiped God by keeping Esther's identity a secret. And we see later on in the book that God uses Mordecai's wisdom in this situation to save thousands of people. Mordecai's faith was not just a set of rules, but rather something that paid attention to the details and was applied accordingly to different situations. And we can learn from that. In 2015, there was a college shooting in Oregon. But what made this shooting so terrifying is that the shooter asked Christians to stand up, and once they stood up, he would shoot them. And that year, my friend asked me, if I was there, would I stand up? And I didn't know how to answer the question because I thought the answer was clear, right? If I didn't stand up, I would be rejecting God. Like, how will God see me? How will other Christians see me? It seemed like standing up was the right choice, almost the only choice. And as I struggled with this question, I asked my mom. And as she listened to this dilemma, she simply said, "Are you stupid?" She asked, "Why are you stupid? Why would you die for no reason?" And while I had arguments in my head, her answer made it seem obvious. Like, don't get me wrong. I think there's a place for martyrs and people who die for what they believe in. But in that scenario, and most like it, I think it's okay to run and hide. Because think about it. The ultimate judge is not the shooter, but God. And the shooter doesn't have the right to your information, and you're much more useful alive than dead. And we see my mom's reasoning from great Christians as well, right? We see in the New Testament that the Apostle Paul spent years running away from authorities, trying to kill him for being a Christian leader. And the underground churches in Asia are secretive about identity for good reason, right? To spread the gospel and to advance the kingdom. So faith isn't just like one answer, right? So with this situation, you can only reason like this if you pay attention to the details and if you love God with your mind. See, faith doesn't look the same in every situation. There's no one answer to every problem. But there is one constant faith in Jesus that requires us to pay attention to the details so that we can act accordingly and in every circumstance. So when we think in detail about our loved ones and about the Bible and about our surrounding culture, that's what Mordecai teaches us. That's how we worship God. Keep thinking, because that's how you love the Lord with your mind. And God does great things with people who devote their minds to his purpose. To recap, how do extraordinary things start? It starts by being faithful in the ordinary, right? And that's one. We show love to our close neighbors by being deliberate, intentional, and relationally focused. And a great way to do this is actually just to schedule things in with people to make it happen. Two, we are attentive to the details, right? And we do this by being observant of our loved ones and of our environment so that our faith may be lived out accordingly. Being faithful like this in the ordinary is how we worship God and work together with Him even to achieve the extraordinary. And we're able to endure because we understand that even when He feels absent, He's actually right here with us in the everyday things of life.